ISO FileMaker Magazine, the professional's resource for FileMaker know-how.
Hi there, my name is Matt Petrowsky. I've been a FileMaker software developer for well over 20 years, and the video that you're about to watch is a live stream that I recorded live. Now, if the content that you find doesn't really match what you're looking for, it's very possible that this is a video that's part of a series. So if it doesn't make sense where you're finding this particular video, then just click on the description down below and you will find a link that will take you to the full series, and you can start with video number 1 and go through all of the videos in sequence. If you like the content and it helps you out, then great. If you'd like more information, then you can always check me out at FileMakerMagazine.com. Alright, hello there, welcome back. Another video where we're going to learn more about FileMaker. Let's get this out here. And there we go. Actually, I should turn those on because that's how I get reminded, as I had a bunch. Alright, so getting familiar with layout mode. Layout mode, I have to be honest, it's my most favorite mode of FileMaker. I love creating scripts, I love going in and defining structure, but I really like doing the UI stuff. It is one of the most empowering feelings that you get from FileMaker when you make something visually that then works and users can use. Now we're going to think about this solution in terms of its use. Right now I have everything at a size that is pretty much super small and is going to be ready for iPhone. In fact, we made our little icon up here in a previous video. When I talk about getting familiar with layout mode, first thing I'll say is I have a little bit of a, let's see, there's what I want, scroll out a little bit. I have a little bit of a dislike of what FileMaker did right around either 15 or 16, and that is these sidebars right here. It used to be that when you worked with FileMaker, you worked with the window, and going in and out of browse mode was really, really simple. But FileMaker decided to unify the application for some reason and attach all of these things on the side, which causes the screen to do this funky shrink and zoom thing. In fact, you can even get FileMaker to go really slow. Now, if you've only recently started with FileMaker, this is not a problem for you because it's what you're used to. For me, I just wanted to show that it is possible. Now, the inspector that we're hiding and showing right there is Command-I or Control-I. I suggest you do that and become familiar with it. It's not that often that you actually hide it, but unfortunately, we are not able to put it to control these. We can't drag them around. The fields and the objects, they have keyboard shortcuts too. I'm using Command-K or Control-K in order to show the fields. The objects I don't remember as much, probably because it is a little bit more obscure of a keyboard shortcut. T just doesn't, I'd have to associate objects tab and remember T. So for me, for some reason, Command-K is just really easy. It brings up the palette, either hides or shows it, and when I show it, then I just click in order to bring my objects forward. Now, moving across these when you need to becomes really useful for being able to go and do things fast. That's what I'm talking about getting familiar. Now, the number one thing that I'd like you to remember about the inspector is that all of these are associated to number keys. So if you use Command 1, Command 2, Command 3, and Command 4, you will see that without having to click, I can cycle through these really quickly. Now there's two of them that you cycle between a lot, and that's Command 3 and Command 1. These are the two that you will use most of the time when you are working within layout mode. You will use this one, but I'm going to say that this is probably a 40, 40, 10, and 10. And that's the percentage that you're using this. Styling you will use mostly when you're you've created all of your styles. If you haven't created them yet, then going here doesn't really matter. This one, you will use this a good amount of time, but once you've got fields, such as this one, which does have the vertical scroll bar turned on, for me, when I'm developing, it's not too often that I'm making new objects. I'm usually option dragging an object in order to make a duplicate, or selecting it and doing just Command-D, Control-D on Windows in order to duplicate that object, and then optionally turning off the label. So the next thing that I would say in layout mode that is that's important to cover is in the position tab, there is one thing that I'd like you to take away from this video and always remember. Matt said do this, and it is use auto sizing. There's so many FileMaker solutions that the developer just never really uses auto sizing at all. In fact, I'll take this off and we'll go into browse mode. And you can see what happens with the layout. The layout by default is staying at the same dimensions. In other words, the height of this body is staying at that height, and it is sizing out right now to the full width of the window. Now, the only reason for that is because of the auto sizing. If I select this object, and as you can see, its anchoring is over onto the right-hand side. If I turn this off and set it to the default anchoring, what I get is this right here. And that's what a lot of FileMaker developers do. They just put their stuff on the layout and then just think, hey, that's great. No, it's not great. FileMaker has given us these tools. Please use them. So familiarity comes in the form of, as I zoom out a little bit, this position tab. Let's get the window over here so we can design and see it at the same time. This position tab is super, super helpful. If you've seen any of my videos over at the FileMaker magazine site, you know that I lament the fact that I am not able to do something like this. The width of this object, I want it double the size, and I want it to go times 2. I'm hitting the asterisk right now. Shift 8. I can't even get that into this program, but yet there's many other graphics programs, Photoshop, Sketch, what have you, they will put a simple calculator into all of these measurements. So I have to do the math in my head. So if this was 70 times 2.3, good luck for me. But in this case, obviously 70 times 2 would be 140. If FileMaker would put the math in this, it would be a lot easier. These are the best thing that you can use with regards to positioning, because all you have to do is always select one object and then know what the value is that you want to take from the one object to another object. So right now I can see that this button is not on the edge of this layout. For me, I like to be really precise. I can drag this, and in layout mode we do have these guides. We have snap to guides, and we have the snap guides. We also have the dynamic guides. The dynamic guides are the ones that you see when you're dragging. You saw that blue line right there? That is now in the middle of that object, and now it's in the middle of the layout. Sometimes, like right now, I would expect it to snap to this other object. In fact, if I add another object onto my layout, and look, you can see that it's now snapping onto the edge of that other object. If I go to this edge, then it'll snap to the other edge. But for some reason, it's not doing it on the edge of the layout. So the position tab, I really love that. In order to get this object, and you can think of me as being a little too particular, but we'll talk about the grid when we lay this out. This height right now is a little bit of an odd height, and the grid is something that you're going to, we'll talk about that in another video, maybe the next one, in the inspector before we start to design this. I'm going to set this to like an Apple standard value of 44 points. This, I also want 44, so I could drag it and it will snap right there to 44, which is nice in that case, but it's not snapping to the edge. So all I have to do is simply select an object such as this and see that the width right here is 300. And now I can't copy it because when a part is selected, it only shows the height. If I don't have anything selected, then the width is available, and in the position I will often copy from one value and simply paste onto another. So with this selected now, all I have to do is go to its right edge and simply just paste the value, and I've now put its right edge on the right edge of the layout. I am now going to take the opportunity to use the auto sizing or the anchors and put that on the edge. So now when I go into browse mode, now everything will scale out for me. Now here's a key little thing with regards to layout mode that some users don't know. A layout by default will only show the layout at the dimensions that it is set up for, in this case a 300 width by however high this part is, unless there is an anchored object. We saw that this object being anchored over to the right forces FileMaker to expand everything out. Likewise, I can do this off screen. If I take the opportunity and put a box right here, and I simply go over to the auto sizing and I turn off the anchor from the top and the other side and anchor it to the bottom, what you're going to see that's going to happen is the layout now expands to fill the whole window. So you can see that as I drag, it moves and the whole layout, all of that gray, is actually being rendered. If, and this is an interesting little aspect, if I move this down into the footer part, you get some really interesting things that happen as I resize this. Notice that it's the footer because FileMaker recognizes that that little object is in the footer instead of the actual body, even though the footer is only set to a physical height of 29. So it's a really interesting thing in terms of how the anchoring behaves with regards to objects. But ultimately, we're going to use the elements in our user interface in order to control how things look. The reason that this is important is because here on a mobile design, I really only want to design for the smallest form factor and then allow the user interface to scale up as it's used on devices with a larger resolution, or the smallest laptop size if it's also going to be used on the desktop. Now, there's a thing called hybrid design, where let's say over in your fields, you are typically going to drag out a field, and by default, a lot of the times those fields, they will look, number one, on Windows, fonts look larger when they are smaller as opposed to the Macintosh. But number two, when a font is a larger size, you can have something work both for mobile and for desktop. But if you keep it at the default, which in this case currently is Arial 13 point, many times it starts out as 12, that is a desktop-only design. It's not something that will work for both mobile and desktop, and I prefer to do hybrid designs myself. So currently I do not have a default style. We will talk about styles in an upcoming video. I've talked about the anchoring, but we can talk about this from the standpoint of this is going to be a mobile design. This first part, how the user interacts with it. Ultimately, I'm going to be using objects that is going to have anchoring, so I'll take this block away. I don't need a footer part. A footer only serves the purpose of if I'm going to be doing output or print. I now get to make the choice. I know that the top navigation, or as I learned in a previous video, just the general header, can control the color that bleeds up into iOS. I have a choice now, typically when I'm designing a FileMaker layout for digital display, meaning it's never going to be output, I usually only want one part, and it usually is the body. But remember, it is possible for us to do something to this effect. Again, you're going to see me use the height here. Rather than dragging this out, if I know I want a fixed height, let's go and make this 300. There's nothing really wrong with me using a single part, and that single part can be top navigation. In fact, in this instance, from the standpoint of a mobile design, I have two options. On startup, when this file loads up, I can use a startup script, and I could say that startup script says I want you to set the zoom to 100%, and I want you to lock it so that the user can't pinch and zoom. Because I really only want to support pinch and zoom when it's an image or something that I want the user to use pinch and zoom. But in the case of the top navigation, by default, it is inherently locked at 100%. The user cannot zoom this whole part. So I can use this whole part as the whole of my design. The problem that I get now is colors. So the solution that I would have for this would be, if I wanted to use all of this one part, I would then have to put a large object on here, and then I could auto anchor it to all of its edges. And when I go into browse mode, I get the same effect as what I had. And I think here I am going to have a line, so I'll turn the line off. I'm going to, in essence, get the same effect, but notice that I'm not getting the resizing. So with that, you can see that I have the anchoring on. You would expect this to zoom down, but like the top navigation does, it is fixed. It's fixed not only to its zoom, but also to its height. So in the case of a mobile design, I do use two parts. I use the top navigation, which I will make whatever height is the height of a normal iOS navigation, and then I will add the part. Now, adding a part is really pretty easy. You simply just drag from this menu bar, but there's also another way. Defined in FileMaker's theme file, the theme that is associated to this particular layout, which we can see right here is Enlightened. In fact, it's a copy of Enlightened. If I look at this, I can see that under Custom, I have Enlightened, and then I have FileMaker's Enlightened. You can never modify FileMaker's versions of themes. As soon as you change a style, FileMaker will make a copy of this and call it Custom. You can then rename it to something so that you're not confused. I will simply do that now, actually, here on the theme appearance. I can just rename this right now, and I'll call this, just so it's clear, My Enlightened. I can always rename it to something else, but as I was stating, I could drag a part in, and of course, where I drop, if I say that's going to be my body, that will give me a body that's about that height. But like I was saying, the theme has a defined internal height for each part. The reason I'm showing you this is it's really nice to be able to use this part setup little option right here. And I got to that by right-clicking. So I right-click, I choose part setup, and I can create and add parts right from here. So I add in the body. Now, where does this come in handy? Look, we can see how long the body is actually specified. This comes in handy when we are working with other parts when we're creating a printed form. If I drag in this part, and it's going to be a sub-summary when sorted by, and I'll just pick a random value right now, I now have to go through and explicitly go to the position tab, select it, and maybe set the position that I want. If you want to know what the default FileMaker has set on the theme for a sub-summary, use that right-click part setup and then create it through that. So sub-summary data, and you'll see, and here's our options, print above and print below. You can only have one sub-summary based on any one given part above and one below. Or maybe it's two, I forget, we could add two. But you can see right here that this sub-summary, the default height for that is 40 points, meaning if I add another one of those, part setup, it will be 40 points. So if we create another sub-summary, let's do it on the ID this time. Can I do it on the data? It should. Let's see, print above. There we go. You can only have one, like I was stating. This sub-summary already exists. You can only have one of any given field above and one below. So we'll select a different field here, and we'll print above as well. But there it is, 40 points. So that's what we have as our introduction to becoming familiar. There is so much more going on with layout mode. It's a lifetime of learning, of picking up techniques and things that you want to do. In the next video, probably what I'll do is I'm going to start to lay out the grid for this to get it ready for me to design all of the other designs. This is the same thing as our data or as our structure. Anything that we can do where we do it once and then it applies throughout the whole solution, do it once the first time and then you don't have to do it over and over again, such as formatting our dates, which are all now being properly formatted thanks to our one custom function. All right, so that's going to be a wrap on this video. Let's see, I don't have any questions that came in for this particular video. So I think for now, I'll just leave you with that information. And I think in the next video, we will set up the grid. I'll talk about that. We'll go get our iOS dimensions for the device that we're going to work off of as our standard. So I will see you in the next video.